On the other side of the Capitol, the House is debating the measure passed by the Senate tonight to get the federal government operating again and avoid a default on the national debt. A spokesman for Majority Leader Cantor says we expect the House to vote sometime between 9:55 p.m. and 10:10 p.m., the vote time subject to change. And tomorrow we'll have reaction to the House and Senate votes on ending the government shutdown and extending the debt limit with Stephen Moore, a Wall Street Journal editorial board member. Also, Congressman Gerald Connolly of Virginia. He's the top Democrat on the House Oversight and Government Reform Subcommittee on Government Operations. And later in the morning, the effect on the world financial markets with Carlo Piovano, acting Europe business editor for the Associated Press. Washington Journal is live every morning on C-SPAN at 7 a.m. Eastern. More than 2 million federal workers, those who had remained on the job and those who had been furloughed, would be paid under the bill passed by the Senate tonight. And it's being debated right now in the House, a vote expected shortly. Our live coverage of the House is always on C-SPAN. The Associated Press writes that the federal government was lurching back to life. In one example, officials met to discuss plans for gearing up back at the Department of Housing and Urban Development, where 307 employees remained at work during the shutdown and more than 8,000 were furloughed. Also attached to the compromise measure is a provision to deny members of Congress a pay raise. It would mark the 6th consecutive year the lawmakers will have acted to make sure they don't get an annual cost of living pay increase that they get automatically unless they vote to freeze their pay. Members of Congress make $174,000 a year. The House is expected to vote shortly after the Senate passed a bill to end the government shutdown and raise the debt ceiling. Jake Sherman of Politico is quoting Appropriations Committee Chairman Hal Rogers in this tweet. After 2 long weeks, it's time to end the government shutdown. It's time to restore some sanity to this place. And the Washington Times writes, Congress was racing Wednesday night to approve legislation ending the shutdown and averting a default in a deal that gave President Obama most of what he sought, an open government and more borrowing authority without denting Obamacare. Now we're going to see an event from today with Campaign to Fix the Debt. This came before the announcement, after the announcement of a deal, but before the Senate vote tonight.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. At this time, I'd like to introduce Maya McGinnis, who is the President of the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget and the President of Fix the Debt.
Thank you. Thanks so much, everybody, for joining us today. This turns out to be an incredibly well-timed conference. But on behalf of Fix the Debt is a nationwide, diverse coalition made up of citizens, business leaders, civic leaders, with the purpose of trying to, in a bipartisan way, focus national attention on the need and push for a comprehensive debt deal that would help deal with the nation's fiscal challenges. Today is obviously an important day. It appears as though we have a real plan put in place that would deal with opening the government and lifting the debt ceiling and putting in place a budget process to help focus on those discussions. We have today with us an incredible gathering of people who are going to talk about sort of the current crisis that we've been in, the state of play where we are, and importantly, the kinds of things that we want to focus on going forward from a really diverse group of people with diverse perspectives. Because again, I think the importance is to talk about how people with different opinions can come together and work on these issues. And I think what's clear is that what we've seen so far as the model in this country is we have been lurching from crisis to crisis, and we can't continue to do that. I think going forward in the coming weeks it's going to be critically important. We know what we need to focus on, the issues of reforming our entitlement systems, our tax code, replacing the sequester with smarter cuts, and finding a plan to put our debt on a downward path. So we think it's critical that it's time to stop the madness of the way we've been governing, start real negotiations, and solve the problem. I'm really thrilled today to be able to introduce Secretary Panetta, who has held so many important roles in all of this, most recently as Secretary of Defense, but has also played instrumental roles in budget negotiations in the past. And he's going to kick off this whole discussion and talk to us from his perspective about all of these issues. We're incredibly lucky to have him. Thank you so much for joining us, Secretary Panetta.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Maya, and thank you for your great work. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you for participating in this effort to try to put this country back on the right track. Our hope is that later today, with actions both by the House and the Senate, that they can bring what I think has been a very shameful and tragic period in our history to an end. This is, it's hard to believe that what has happened has been not the result of an economic crisis, not the result of war, but the result of a self-inflicted wound by people who frankly swear to make sure that they will do everything to protect and defend the Constitution of this country. This country. 17 years ago, we went through a similar shutdown when I was Chief of Staff to President Clinton. And at the time, I thought that there were, two lessons that were learned by that experience. One was that you don't take a step that hurts the American people, innocent American people, by shutting the government down. That it makes no sense to use that weapon against your very constituents, against the people who elected you to office. And secondly, that ultimately the lesson that came out of that was it was better to govern than to create gridlock and to shut the government down. Better to govern. And that was the case. 17 years later, I think those lessons still apply. It makes no sense to shut the government down and to hurt this country, to hurt innocent people, kids, women who need nutrition assistance, families that are trying to meet their debts at the end of the month, putting people out of work, putting people out of jobs, threatening individuals in terms of their quality of life. It makes no sense to do that. To take a step that threatens our economy, hurts our growth levels at an economy that's been through some rough times and that's looking like it's it may be on the right track. Why would you take a step that would deliberately hurt our economy? And hurting our national defense. Let me tell you that...
Objection.
I now move to proceed to executive session to consider calendar number 344.
The question is on the motion to proceed. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. The ayes appear to have it.
Senate
The ayes
clerk, a
do have
motion
it.
to the desk.
The clerk will report the nomination.
Nomination, National Labor Relations Board, Richard F. Griffin, Jr. of the District of Columbia to be General Counsel. Cloture motion. We, the undersigned senators, in accordance with the
Mr.
provisions...
President, I ask unanimous consent to reading the names be waived.
Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent that the Senate now go into morning business and the senators be allowed to speak for 10 minutes each.
Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent the Senate proceed to executive session to consider nominations calendar number 248, 331, 332, 333, 342, 345, 351, 352, 353, 354, 355, 360, 363, 364, 365, 366, 368, 369, 370, 373, 374, 375, 376. That the nominations be confirmed en bloc, motion to reconsider be considered made and laid on the table with no intervening action or debate. That no further motion be in order to any of the nominations. Any related statements be printed in the record. That the President be immediately notified of the Senate's action.
Without objection.
Mr. President, on the matter that we completed just a short time ago when we were in executive session regarding Richard Griffin, I failed to ask consent that the mandatory quorum under Rule 22 be waived. I now ask that.
Without objection.
Unanimous consent the Committee of Commerce be discharged from further consideration of Michael P. O'Reilly, and that the nomination be placed on the executive calendar.
Without objection. The committee is discharged.
I ask consent that the Senate...
The nomination is placed on the calendar.
So sorry. I ask consent that the Senate proceed to consider the privileged section of the law under executive calendar presidential nomination number 131, that the nomination be confirmed, motion reconsidered be considered made and laid on the table, with no intervening action or debate, that no further motion be in order, to the nomination, that any related statement be printed in the record and that President Obama be immediately notified of the Senate's action and the Senate then resume legislative session.
Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent the Senate proceed to these resolutions, S 272, 273, and 274.
Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent the resolutions be agreed to, the preambles be agreed to, the motions to reconsider be laid upon the table on each of these three matters, and that there be no intervening action or debate on any of them.
Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent the Senate proceed to S. Conres 24.
The clerk will report.
S. Conres 24, concurrent resolution providing for a conditional adjournment or recess of the Senate and an adjournment of the House of Representatives.
Is there objection to proceeding to the measure? Without objection, the Senate will proceed.
I ask unanimous consent the concurrent resolution be agreed to, the motion reconsider be laid on the table with no intervening action or debate.
Without objection.
H.J. Res. 80 is due, it's my understanding, is due for a second reading.
The Senator is correct. The clerk will read the title of the joint resolution for the second time.
H.J. Res. 80, joint resolution making continuing appropriations for the Bureau of Indian Affairs, the Bureau of Indian Education, and the Indian Health Service for fiscal year 2014 and for other purposes.
I would object to any further proceedings at this time.
Objection is heard. Joint resolution will be placed on the calendar.
I ask unanimous consent that during the adjournment or recess of the Senate from Wednesday, October 16th through Monday, October 28th, the Majority Leader and Senators Kane and Rockefeller be authorized to sign duly enrolled bills or joint resolutions.
Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent that notwithstanding the upcoming recess or adjournment of the Senate, the President of the Senate, President pro tempore of the Senate, and the Majority and Minority Leaders be authorized to make appointments to commissions, committees, boards, conferences, or interparliamentary conferences authorized by law by concurrent action of the two houses or by order of the Senate.
Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent that the appointment at the desk appear separately in the record as if made by the Chair.
Without objection.
Note the absence of quorum.
The clerk will call the roll. Majority Leader.
I ask consent to call the quorum be terminated.
Without objection.
I now ask unanimous consent the Senate stand in recess, subject to the call of the Chair.
Without objection. The Senate stands in recess, subject to the call of the Chair.